I wanted to do another mini deep dive on a topic that I didn't think I was going to speak on because I felt like I already knew everything there was to know about it, or at least enough. But sometimes you just never know, because there might actually be some more stuff out there if you dig even further beneath the surface. So today what I decided to do was give you 10 things you may or may not know about American chattel slavery. The first thing I wanted to talk about was how slavery was not just a Southern thing, despite contrary to popular belief. Because we often hear about plantations in Mississippi or South Carolina, just to name a couple of places, but northern states benefited massively from slavery as well. Banks in New York and Boston financed slave voyages. Northern factories processed cotton picked by enslaved hands. Even prestigious universities like Harvard and Yale profited directly from slavery-related endowments. So the North wasn't innocent. They were very complicit, in fact. Slavery actually lasted longer than we were taught. While the Emancipation Proclamation came in 1863, slavery didn't truly actually end until June 19th, 1865, which we all know famously today as Juneteenth, when enslaved people in Texas were finally told they were free, more than 2 years later. But even after that, many were tricked into staying on plantations for wages that never actually came. In truth, the system didn't vanish overnight, it actually just transformed into something else entirely. Enslaved Africans built Americans' wealth quite literally, from the White House and the Capitol building all the way to Wall Street itself. Enslaved labor was the backbone of America's infrastructure. Cotton, also known as King Cotton, accounted for over half of all U.S. exports before the Civil War. America's rise as an economic superpower was financed by the unpaid labor of black people. Slavery was protected by law and religion. The Constitution itself didn't abolish slavery. It actually protected it. Clauses like the 3/5 compromise that basically said that black people were seen as 3/5 of a human being. It dehumanized black people to preserve Southern political power. Even many churches defended slavery, twisting scripture to claim it was quote unquote God's will. Morality was redefined to fit economics of that time. Despite what some people believe, enslaved people did fight back, and I feel like this is one of those things that a lot of people actually do know about, but there's not as many that do or are aware of them. But there are historical documented rebellions. If y'all follow my page, I did a whole We Fought Back series, and I talked about or tried to highlight as many rebellions that occurred throughout history. Of course, you know, the Nat Turner one is one of the most, if not the most famous one of them all. But despite brutal punishments, enslaved Africans never stopped resisting. There were over 250 recorded slave rebellions in the US, not to mention everyday acts of defiance, breaking tools, feigning illnesses, preserving culture through song and language. Survival itself was seen as a form of resistance. The slave trade tore apart millions of families. Children were often sold separately from their parents, and marriage had no legal recognition. A mother could be forced to watch her child sold like livestock, and these family fractures created generational trauma and emotional wounds that didn't end with emancipation. Despite the 1865 coming around and the releasing of slaves officially and finally happening, the end of slavery didn't necessarily mean freedom. After the emancipation came black codes, sharecropping, and convict leasing, systems that are designed to keep black Americans poor and powerless. And in many cases, former slaves found themselves working for the same masters, but now under the illusion of employment, and the change just merely changed the shape. But they were still chains nonetheless. Slavery wasn't just physical, it was also psychological, which is something I always talk about. I said you can beat somebody, you know, but the physical wounds will heal, but that psychological, once they get in your head, that's it. Enslavers used humiliation, religion, and violence to strip people of their identity. They banned reading and writing because education meant empowerment. Even hairstyles, languages, and names were erased to destroy memory and culture, a calculated attack on identity. And what's also interesting, and I'm not going to put the picture here, but I actually saw a picture of an enslaved black man literally whipping another black man who was laid face down, spread out on the ground, with no clothes on, while he was whipping him. Like, the master literally gave this person the whip and made him whip his brother. Basically, I'm not saying he's his literal brother, but brother because of identity, and literally had to do that in front of everybody. And it's crazy because I'm looking at it. I was sitting here, saying to myself, the most divine thing that this person could have did was turn around and use the whip on Massa, but Massa was probably holding a gun at him while he was doing it. So who knows what he was threatening him with if he did not do it. And that's what ended up happening. And it's crazy because when you think about how I described that imagery, and you can actually go and look that up, and it's on Google, it plays out in a way even to this day. Insurance companies profit off of human lives. Yes, enslaved people were insured like property. Major U.S. insurance firms, including some that still exist to this day, issued policies that paid slave owners for the quote-unquote loss of enslaved laborers, hence the reparations they received. To them, human life had a market value and death was just a business transaction. And the last point I'm going to go over is how America never truly reckoned with slavery. While other nations like Germany confronted the atrocities head on, America largely buried slavery under myths of freedom and progress. The truth is uncomfortable but necessary, because you can't heal from a past you refuse to acknowledge. And until this country tells the full truth about slavery, its legacy will keep repeating itself in various and new forms. Mass incarceration, economic inequality, and racial bias that traces back to the same roots are just a couple examples of that. In conclusion, slavery wasn't just a moment in history. It's literally the blueprint of how America operates. And if we ever want to understand why things are the way they are today, we have to stop sanitizing the past and start confronting it. Because the story of slavery isn't just about the people who were oppressed. It's about the system that made oppression very profitable.